Hi, I'm Krista Gregg, your host for She Diaries, a podcast sharing the real, unfiltered stories of women who've lost their husbands to suicide. It's raw, it's honest, and it's about finding your way through the unthinkable. Before we get to the show, please know this podcast includes real stories of suicide loss and is not for little ears. Some episodes may reference the method of suicide and include emotionally intense or uncomfortable descriptions. We understand how sensitive this content is and carefully edit each episode to honor and respect both our guests and listeners. If you or someone you love is struggling, call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Please take care while listening, pause if you need to, and you can find links to additional mental health resources in our show notes. Thank you for listening. Hi, everyone. Today's guest is Charlotte Maya, author of Sushi Tuesdays. You guys can see on video, I have devoured this book with so many notes, and it is a memoir of love, loss, and family resilience. Over a decade ago, when Charlotte's husband Sam died by suicide, Charlotte had to navigate parenting her two young boys, her pain and grief brain, which we'll go into in the podcast, and the silence that often follows tragedy. In this episode, she shares what helped, her sacred Tuesdays, honest conversations with her kids, and the Janes who showed up when she couldn't stand on her own. And keep an ear out because Engineer Jane is my favorite. It is a story about trusting your instincts, especially when the path ahead makes no sense. This is Charlotte Maya's story.
These are feelings drive me away. Fingers crossing out on my way.
Hi, Charlotte. It is so wonderful to have you here on She Diaries. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And for everyone listening or watching, this is Charlotte Maya, and she is here to tell us her story with her husband, Sam, and their lives together.
Krista, thank you so much for having me here today. I just feel so passionately that suicide is something that we have to talk about, and people are so afraid to say the S word, but the thing that helps is talking about it. So I am really grateful for your work in this space.
Happy to be here, and I've enjoyed it. We've had a few conversations on the back end, and Charlotte, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but Charlotte does have a book called Sushi Tuesdays, and we'll talk about how that came about, but I'm already going to put it out there, put that on your wish list so you can understand a little bit more. She goes into some amazing detail and metaphors of what her experience was like, her individual experience was like going through all this. So we will dive in, but before we get to the heavy stuff, tell us about your life with Sam. Talk to us about the beginning and in life with him.
Yeah, well, Sam and I met in law school at UCLA, and Sam was the best thing that came out of law school. I no longer practice law. I haven't in a long while. I sometimes call myself a recovering attorney. My best friend I also met in law school. So we got married pretty young. We were 24 and 26 when we got married. In fact, we graduated from law school the year after we got married because I thought, well, I can take the bar exam a couple times, but I'm only going to get married once. And so I really didn't want to be distracted by wedding planning when I was also taking the bar exam. And things were they were very easy with Sam. One of our friends told me once that walking into a room with Sam and me was like walking out of the cold and into a warm room with a fire going. And that was how it felt inside the relationship as well. It was a place where I felt safe and warm and loved. And, after several years, we had 2 kids and a dog. And I mean, it was pretty unremarkable in a lot of ways. Our life together was pretty, boring.
Did I read it right in the book that you guys also moved into your childhood home in California?
Yeah.
My parents. That was really sweet.
My parents had, my dad was a physicist and he had gotten his sort of dream job as a physics professor. He had worked for NASA for many years. And then later in his career, he got the opportunity to teach and he loved teaching. And so he took this job in the Midwest as a physics professor. He was always sort of a quintessential nutty professor, so it suited him well. And so my parents moved to the Midwest and they didn't sell their house right away. But then when they were ready to sell it, Sam and I were ready to buy it. So, I bought my childhood at home and we did some remodeling. So it really felt like our home, not just, moving into mom and dad's house.
Right.
We paid the mortgage.
But I don't know, the idea of raising your kids literally where you grew up,
Mm-hmm.
that's really sweet. And I mean, to be able to also make it your own.
Yeah.
So you and Sam, you had two boys,
Yeah.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you're living your lives. And he was in financial, I don't
Mm-hmm.
recall specifically, but I know that he was interested in the stock market. He was doing finance of some sort.
Yeah.
What was kind of the daily life like?
Sam was a stockbroker, and
Okay.
so we live on the West Coast, and he worked East Coast hours because the market opens 9:30 East Coast, so 6:30 West Coast. So our days usually started pretty early, and um, our older child was my fourth pregnancy, so we I had two miscarriages and a tubal pregnancy before I gave birth to our first child. And so when I was pregnant with that child, Sam and I thought a lot about whether I would go back to work or not. And we were in a position where I could stay home for a while. And so we decided to do that because it had been such a road for us to become parents.
Yeah.
And so that was the decision that we made, and we're lucky to be able to make that decision.
The way that I read the book, you also thrived and you enjoyed being a mom. You enjoyed that
I loved
life,
it.
which is
Loved it.
great.
Loved it. Loved being at home with the kids. Loved being able to, watch their first steps and hear their first words and read with them and take them to the park. And in some ways it was a very sort of traditional family life for Sam and me. So he worked and I was home with the kids, and there were a lot of things I really liked about it.
So when did you start noticing that work was becoming really stressful for Sam, or the financial market? It sounded like he would make some comments here or there, but it wasn't anything that was a red flag. It was just daily stress is how I was reading.
There were never any sort of real red flags. I mean, if you have a job, you have job stress. If you don't have a job, then you super have job stress. So it was totally normal to come home, and he would talk about situations or something that he was thinking about. Sam had a lot of integrity, and so we would often talk about the things that he would see and struggle with, and so it didn't seem like inordinate stress. There was, after his death, I could look at things differently. And there was one day that he had come home, and I think it was it's hard to remember now, but maybe just a few weeks before his death, when he said something like, "I can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
But at the time, how often do we say those kinds of things?
Every day.
I can't do this anymore, right?
Yep.
I mean, you say that when the baby's not sleeping through the night. I can't do this anymore. But somehow you drag yourself through. So it didn't strike me as particularly alarming.
Right.
He had back pain. Sam had back pain from the time he was 13. So that too was something that and he'd had 2 surgeries when the kids were little. and I could see he was in pain. I could see he was physically in pain. And I do think that our stress manifests in our bodies, often in backs and shoulders and necks. And so that also struck me as something that that I noticed.
Well, and you mentioned in your book, as you're reflecting, because it seems like there's little poignant moments where it's like, well, maybe this was him telling me, or maybe this was something, but one of the things that you discovered was chronic pain can often lead to depression.
Right.
And that was a question I think you were asked by your therapist, like, was Sam depressed? And then the idea of, oh, wow, well, he's suffered with pain his whole life, maybe. And we're not here, we don't know at the end of the day, but that was kind of one of those discoveries of, well, he's had this back pain since he was a kid, and he was about to have his third surgery.
Well, he wasn't about to have a third surgery,
okay.
But I wondered whether that was something he was thinking about. Like, he never mentioned to me that he wanted to have surgery again, but I did wonder about it because I could see that he was in pain. And so that was something that we hadn't talked about. But this is kind of why I think it's so important to talk about suicide, to develop sort of a literacy in suicide, because there are things like chronic pain that can lead to depression, that if we just understand that in the same way we understand that having a balanced diet is good for overall nutrition, like we understand about nutrition and exercise. And so understanding about mental health in the same sort of just very matter-of-fact way, I think makes such a big difference in how we interact with each other. And so knowing that there might be a connection between chronic pain and depression, and knowing, for example, I just think this is so important to know, that if you ask somebody if they're thinking about ending their life, you are not going to put that idea into their brain. You're not going to cause them to think about suicide for the first time. Instead, what's actually happening is you're demonstrating that you are a safe place for somebody to let you know that they're really struggling, and that you're seeing that you see and you understand that life is kind of hard sometimes, and we all need those moments where we know we can talk to somebody.
It opens up that door of vulnerability. Like, okay, we're going to say the S word right now, and I need you to be honest with me about this, because I'm here for you.
Right.
But if you don't say the S word, if you tiptoe around it, hey, are you having a bad day? Or, life's kind of hard, right? That you gotta get to the point.
Have you thought about taking your life? Do you have a plan for how you might? Those were not questions that I asked Sam. They honestly hadn't occurred to me. But knowing what I know now, there are some signs that I would absolutely pay attention to. And the most important thing, I think, is to trust your gut. You know your people.
Yeah.
You know your people. And when something seems off, and something had kind of seemed off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And so when something seems off, it's okay to ask. And your people will have different things. But for Sam, he had lost a little bit of weight, not a ton, like, I don't know, 10, 15 pounds. So not like a shocking amount of weight. But he didn't have an awful lot of weight to lose, and it was a little out of character for him for his weight to be off, is probably the best word I would use to describe it. It was weird for him to be so emotionally heavy. And then one of the weirdest things that I did not recognize at the time. And in my defense, when I did practice law, I was a trust and estates lawyer. So I looked at wills and trusts every single day. I didn't think about it that weirdly, because it was what I did. And Sam, the night before his death, had our own wills and trust out on the kitchen counter. And now I understand that that can be a sign of suicidal ideation. But at the time, not only was I a wills and trusts attorney, I was actually thinking that we needed to revise our own will and trust because it had our older child, Danny, by name, but it did not have our younger child, Jason, by name. It just said everything at the end of the day goes to Danny and any other children we might have in equal shares. So as a practical matter, it functioned just fine. But sort of emotionally as a mom, I wanted both of the kids by name in the document. So when Sam had it out on the counter, I didn't ask him, oh, hey, what are you thinking about? I said, oh, hey, I've been thinking about revising those. And so we never had a conversation about it.
Well, you were in a completely different mindset. You're thinking, oh, let's make progress. Like, this is something that's been on my mind. And
yes,
yes,
I was looking forward and he was not, but I didn't understand that at the time. But when we talk about sort of suicide literacy and understanding what those signs are, if you know, looking at your will and trust might be a sign of suicidality, then now you know.
Now you know. And you can compare. He's losing a little weight. He's had chronic pain his whole life. Not to say that anyone that fits this category, but you can at least ask the question.
You can ask the question, or even just, hey, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
And and who knows where that will lead, and being willing to listen and follow to where it leads.
Yeah. Talk about that day. Your boys had a soccer game, and Sam decided to stay home, and you were reflecting about, at one point, did I infer he was going to take a nap? Did he say he was going to take a nap? And that seems murky kind of in the moment, but he didn't go to the boys' soccer game with you guys.
So he was tired, and I knew he hadn't slept, and that was also weird. But on Friday, the market dropped 300 points, which today doesn't sound like that big a number, but at the time it was a really big number. So he was very stressed. And so it made sense that it would keep him up at night. But it was weird that he never came to bed. That was weird. Usually if he was stressed, he would eventually come to bed. But that night, it didn't seem like he had come to bed at all. So I knew he was exhausted. And so he said he was going to stay home and take a nap. And I took the kids to the game myself.
Great.
And which was unusual. Normally he would have gone with. But it made sense because he was exhausted.
Exactly. And you're giving him that space too, to take care of himself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
If
then
I
you
don't
guys
sleep, I
had a
need a
plan
nap.
to go hiking. So you had a very active day going.
Well, you know how it is
fun
with little
family day.
kids. Yeah.
No, a great day. I'm thinking, like, I would enjoy that. That sounds lovely. And he wasn't home when you guys got home. So you tried to give him a call. Tell me a little bit about that afternoon and what ended up happening.
Yeah, so I had taken the kids to the soccer game, and then after the game, like, we had a whole plan for the day. After the game, we were going to have lunch, and then we were going to go for a hike, take the dog for a hike. And so when I got home after the soccer game, he wasn't there, which was a little weird. So I called him and I got voicemail. But then we went to lunch, and we had lunch. We picked him up a sandwich as well. And then when we got home, he still wasn't there, which then was very weird. That he hadn't checked in even was kind of weird. And so I called again and got his voicemail. And it was in October, so the days were getting shorter, and it was a beautiful fall day, like clear blue sky, gorgeous afternoon for a hike, not too hot. And but I didn't want to lose our daylight. So I also thought Sam would sometimes, if he was stressed, and I knew he was because the market had dipped, he would go for a drive. That was something that would relax him. And so I thought, well, maybe he went for a drive, and that would explain why his car wasn't there and whatever. So I load up the kids and the dog, and we go for a hike, and it was a beautiful day. And as we're getting onto the trail at the beginning, this guy was coming off the trail, and he said, oh, hey, up ahead, there's a baby rattlesnake. So you should pick up the dog and just be aware. And I was really glad that he had let us know, because baby rattlers are sometimes hard, you don't see them, and they don't rattle yet because they're so little, and their rattles aren't totally developed. And so sometimes you can surprise them, and that is when they bite. And so up ahead in the trail, we see this little snake, and so I pick up the dog, and we walked around this. The trail was really wide right there, so we walked around the snake, and I'm thinking, oh my God, Sam is going to kill me when we get home, because he would never have walked the kids around a rattlesnake. We used to call him Safety Dad, because he was always he was always doing the safest thing. And so we go around the snake, and we continue to go up the trail, and there was a little pond, and Jason caught a little frog, and he made me take a picture of his frog. He said, look, Mommy, take a picture for Daddy so we can show him my frog when I get home. It's the tiniest little frog. And then it started to get a little cooler. The sun's starting to go down, and in the mountains, once the sun starts to go down, it can go down very quickly. So we went back down the trail. We hadn't gone that far. The kids were 6 and 8. It wasn't like we were backpacking in the Sierras or something, but but also they're 6 and 8. So sometimes they don't go that fast, and they get distracted by rocks and worms and fun, wonderful things. And the reception was really poor in the mountains. And this was in 2007. So just for context, the first iPhone came out in July of 2007. So, I had a flip phone,
Right.
And cell reception was often poor in places where there was hills. So by the time we got off the trail and back into the parking lot, I still didn't have a missed phone call or a voicemail from Sam. And now I hadn't talked to him all day, and I was very concerned.
That's not normal.
That was not at all normal. And, but I've got 2 little kids in the back and the dog. And so, you do the mommy thing. And so I remember driving home from the trail, and it's just maybe 10, 15 minute drive. And I could hear the kids talking in the background, but I have no idea what they were saying, because
Right.
by this point now, I was very concerned, because I hadn't heard from him all day. And this was very weird. And I just kept thinking, I just wanted to get home so I could see his car parked in front of our house. And when I turned the corner onto our street, there was a police car parked in front of the house, and the lights were flashing silently. And that's probably when I started holding my breath. But as I got closer to the car, I could see my front porch. And the way my mind was thinking is, if the police are here at my house, they're going to be on the front porch, because there were 2 chairs there. It's a nice little welcoming
They
area.
shouldn't have had access, and we'll find out later why. But
Yes, I just pictured them sitting on the front porch, like friends coming over for dinner. I don't know.
just stopping by.
And so there was this moment when I exhaled, because they weren't in front of my house. And I thought, oh, thank God the emergency belongs to somebody else, which is not a very charitable thought, but it is what went through my head. And then as I turned into my driveway, I could see up at the top of the driveway, there they were. And there was a policeman and a policewoman and a priest. And I kept staring at that white clerical collar. And I just thought, this is not going to be good news.
Yeah.
So I put the car in park. I told the kids, you stay here, I'll be right back. I get out of the car, I slam the door closed, and I go to talk to them. And what I said was, my children are in the car. And the policewoman said, I will watch the boys, and they need to talk to you, meaning the policeman and the priest. And so I walked into my house with them. I mean, they walked in first, and the door was already unlocked, which I thought, that's weird.
Right.
And the policeman told me, I think you need to sit down. And I said, I don't think so. Like, there's this weird thing that happens when I think, if I don't sit down, then I can stop from happening whatever he's about to tell me.
Yeah.
Like it's a weird sort of like if I don't sit down, then whatever bad news he's about to tell me won't be true somehow. I don't know.
I almost see it as an element of control. Like you are not in control of what is about to come. They're in your house. They have showed up. You did not ask for this. And the least, you can own is whether you sit or stand.
Yeah. I think that's right. But then I did sit down and I was really glad I did because that's when he told me that Sam had taken his own life and all the feeling sort of drained out of my body. And one of the things that they told me, they said, so after they told me what happened, I asked a couple questions. They said, we will tell the children that their father died, but you have to tell them how. And we recommend that you tell them the truth because you do not want them to find out from somebody else. And on a day when nothing made sense, that actually made sense to me.
Yeah.
And so the policewoman brought the kids into the house, and I sat in a chair in my room. It was kind of an oversized chair, but like I said, they were little, so we all fit in one chair at that time. And I told them the truth. And I told them that their father loved them with all of his heart. And I told them that he had taken his own life by jumping off of a tall building in Pasadena. And it is the hardest thing I've ever done. But also, I'm really glad I did because my children know that they can count on me for honest answers to difficult questions. Those kids turned 26 and 24 yesterday. And yesterday, yeah.
Gosh.
And they still know, they both have the same birthday. They still know that they can count on me for honest answers to life's hardest questions. And sometimes the answer is I don't know. And that's fair.
Yeah. And right after the news broke, 2 neighborhood friends came over to help immediately. So what were they able to do for you in those moments?
So the police, they're like, they've kind of done their job, right? Which is, I'm really grateful for the job that they did. I just want to kind of pause and make a note of gratitude and appreciation for our first responders.
Yeah.
Because I know, I don't know, I just know from my side, that is a very difficult job, but they did their job well. And their advice to be honest and transparent about Sam's death really held me for this journey, that level of honesty and transparency. So just a note that I am so grateful for first responders because it is a very hard job and they did it really well.
And, you're experiencing something once in your life. They see this every day. And that is something, in my profession, I can't even imagine day after day seeing. There's wonderful, beautiful stories out there too that they get to help with and witness. But they do a fantastic job for comforting, for providing resources, and to also let listeners know too, they came to your house because they wanted to make sure, if I read that right, it wasn't a murder-suicide. So
Correct.
They were actually, to kind of tie that piece of the story up, they were in the house making sure you and your kids were okay.
Yes, they were, because horrifyingly, sometimes that does happen. Murder-suicide does happen. And when I did get off the trail from the hike, there were a couple missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize.
Right.
That was probably them. I don't know for certain, but I'm 100% sure that was them. Those were the missed calls because they had tried to call me. And when they couldn't reach me, and then when they went to the house and they knocked on the door and nobody answered, they were concerned for my safety, for the kids' safety. And so, yeah. So, then they go, right? So they come, they do their job. They say, how do you have family? And I say, yeah, my parents are 75 miles away. And they say, do you have anyone closer? And I say, yeah, well, my sister's 20 miles away. And they said, do you have anyone closer than that? And so I have these family friends who are kind of like an aunt and uncle to me, and they lived, 2 blocks away. And so they came over and just held me and the kids. In fact, I think they might have called them even while I think they called them before they brought the kids back into the house, actually, because they heard me tell the kids something that was true then and I believe is true now, is that their father's love will be there for them their whole life.
Yeah.
And so I think they were there kind of in
during
the
that process.
doorway as I was talking to the kids.
Well, there's one thing that still continues to stand out to me that does hold true, that they were able to predict for you. And you received a very, very tight embrace and hug. And then we're told, what is to come next is so unfair. You're going to have to comfort a lot of people.
Yeah. She held me. She said, this is going to sound completely unfair, but you are going to have to comfort a lot of people. And she was right. It did sound completely unfair, and she was right. I did have to comfort a lot of people.
You had not only your 2 boys, you had, of course, both sides of the family. You were juggling different belief systems. There's just so many different ways that everyone's experiencing grief that you really had to navigate from day 2 and on of this whole thing.
So listeners understand. Yeah, Sam was Jewish and I was Christian. And so part of when I saw that white clerical collar, part of my little brain is like, whoa. You're not even a rabbi. You can't even be here. Like, you don't belong here. But I knew exactly what kind of funeral arrangements Sam wanted. But I think there were people in the family, on Sam's side of the family, who were worried that I wouldn't do what they thought was right. And it it was hard, but also, I don't know. I'm kind of spicy enough to go.
I love that you were spicy. And I say this with I don't know if everybody. I can see myself. I can speak for myself personally. I can see myself trying to please everybody because I know everybody's going through all of this. But your husband. You know what he wanted, and I thought it was even just more. I don't want to say serendipitous, but later on you found his actual writings of what he wanted, and you started going down the list of, okay, I did that check. And it was this, I don't know, recertification of, yes, I know this man and I know who he was, and I don't need to question that anymore. I knew Sam. I love Sam. And you were able to own it and know it from the beginning. And that whole process and Sushi Tuesdays where it came full circle, that was touching.
Well, it's so hard. In my situation, I really didn't know in advance. Like I say, looking back in retrospect, now I can look back at it and go, okay, knowing what I know now about mental health and suicidality and suicidal ideation, I can see signs that I missed. And the guilt can be harrowing, really. It's so heavy. But, I've had a lot of good therapy. And so I couldn't, you can't see what you don't know, which is why these conversations are so helpful. But it didn't make, part of why it didn't make sense to me is that I did know Sam. And he would never have left those kids, even if he had left me, which I didn't see. But even if he had, I'm a big girl. Whatever. He never, not whatever, but you know what I'm saying. I'm a big girl. And if you had to leave me, okay, that would break my heart, but he would never have left the kids. And that's what I just kept coming back to. There was no way, there's no way he was 100% himself. There's no way he could think rationally. Every part of our physiology is wired for self-preservation. Mm-hmm. Even babies will gasp and flail if they're tossed into a body of water, right? It's so innate. So something has to go glitchy in order to accomplish a suicide. You can't get there without something that's not working the way it's supposed to be working. And so I was able to see that very clearly. And then I was also able to see my own role for what it wasn't. It wasn't my fault. And the thing, if Sam did anything wrong, it was in not asking for help. That is what I feel very passionately about. It's our jobs to ask for the help we need, because nobody else is inside our own little brains. We have to reach out for the help that we need, which is why it can be very helpful when you ask the question, are you thinking about suicide?
Right.
Now the person just has to say, yeah. And it gives a container to hold that conversation safely. And as we said before, I was a trust and estates attorney, so I often had read those documents where you write down what you want to happen with your remains, what kind of funeral you want, whether you want Herculean efforts at the end of your life, all of those kinds of decisions. And I thought I knew what I actually thought is, I thought Sam had given me full discretion to do whatever I wanted. And so I sort of operated on the premise that I had full discretion to do whatever I wanted after his death in terms of a funeral and, whether it was a cremation or burial or what to do. Because I had given him full discretion to do whatever after my death. And what I discovered after the funeral, after the burial, after it was too late to change anything, was that he had not actually given me full discretion. He had a very specific list of what he wanted. And so when I first found that list, I kind of sank to my knees, actually, because I thought, oh no, what have I screwed up? But when I went through his list, I actually had done everything he had asked.
You knew
Not
him.
because it was on the list, but because I knew my husband. Yeah.
It was just beautiful. It was beautiful to read that.
It was for me too, to read that list.
Oh,
Phew.
I know. And if anything's wrong, we're going to burn the list.
That's right. Nobody needs to know.
Nobody needs to know.
But listeners, no list was burned.
Oh. It goes back to trusting your gut. And through all of this,
Yes.
You trusted your gut with your grief. Talk a little bit too about, you had two sons to take care of that were both reacting very opposite in this situation. And often while you were trying to help one, it wasn't helpful to the other, and vice versa, and navigating being a single mom and helping them through their grief.
Yeah, being a single parent is not for the faint of heart. Yeah. And not surprisingly, each of the children had different ways of experiencing and expressing and working through their grief. And this is universal, right? We all have our own ways of managing grief. And so part of it is learning how. And So, the children sort of teach you what you need to know. And I had one who refused to say what we called the D words, dead and daddy. And one who wanted to talk about dead daddy all the time. And so this was not an easy space to navigate. And so there were times when, Jason wanted to talk about dead daddy and Danny did not. And so trying to manage for both of them what they needed in those moments was tricky. It was really tricky. And we do our best and, we make mistakes and then we circle back and try again.
Yep.
And I don't have any answers, but I'm willing to sit with the questions. And so I think that's an important part of parenting and grieving.
Well, and I liked when there were harder moments, you knew it wasn't just about, for instance, the Lego set. You know, and tearing it apart because Dad and I did this together and now he's gone, so I'm just going to destroy it. And you knew it wasn't just about the Lego set. And then for him to build it back together so beautifully in his own way. That was just so healing to read and symbolically just such a wonderful representation of going through this process. It's never going to be the same.
Yeah. The writer in me, when life hands you the perfect metaphor, you're just
you took it.
You
took it.
It was
remember great.
This. Yeah. So there was a night when Jason was just really distraught and he was breaking this Lego ship that, the ones with like 17 pages of instructions. And it was probably a Star Wars spaceship or something. And he smashed it. And my first inclination, is to stop him because, breaking things is kind of not fab. But I also had like a very quick checklist to go through in my head. Well, he's not hurting himself. He's not hurting his brother. And this is not irreplaceable. So I let him. Like I didn't actually try to stop him. I was like, okay, check. Well, I guess he can break it. And tried to, stay with him. But he was, it's awful. He's tears streaming down his face and he's breaking it and smashing against the wall and against the floor. And it's those little Lego pieces scattering all over the floor. And then at one point he looks at me and says, "Mommy, you have to fix it." Like as if, right? It was so clear that this is what our lives looked like, shattered all over the place. Like, you can't fix this. And eventually, we got everybody settled down into bed. So I had collected all the pieces into a big Tupperware. And the next morning, he asked for it. He's like, "Mommy, can I have my Tupperware?" I was like, "Okay, do you need any help?" He's like, "Nope, I'm good." So he goes off and starts building, and I don't know, fed the dog or did a load of laundry or brushed my teeth. Who knows what I did? And
the dog got fed that day. Check.
Thank God. Yeah, it's not always the case. Poor dog. But I would check in on him. "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm good. Do you need any help?" "Nope, I got it." And then he came to me after a while and he was so excited and he's holding it up to me. He's like, "Look, Mommy, and he's showing me all the laser blasters and the fancy things and his imagination that he's put on here. And he says, "It's better than it was before."
Yeah. And he made it and he had to go through that. I interviewed someone last week, and this is a small little tangent, but we were talking about art therapy and this idea of how you have to, just the creation of something and the process of creating. It's not even about the end result, but it's just going through the motions of creating whatever that art piece is or what you're constructing. It is so healing for so many people. And when we were talking last week, your son absolutely came to mind for this.
And sometimes that art, it's like thinking out loud. Mm-hmm. And the art itself can be the thinking that is too scrambled inside, but it can be kind of an external thought process, and we surprise ourselves often with what happens.
Well, and so I want to find, because I think you had a really great description of grief brain in here. And I don't want you to have to try to memorize that. But I want to find it because I thought it was so descriptive in a way that if anyone hasn't experienced this, maybe they can somehow, I don't want to say relate, but understand a little bit. So this is what you wrote. Grief brain is real. I spent a lot of my time staring vacantly. I used to be intelligent, efficient, and occasionally even funny, but I couldn't hold an idea long enough to form a coherent thought. I was sluggish and unmotivated. I felt blank, like an erased whiteboard. Whatever had been noteworthy was reduced to inky flakes at my edges. I rested my chin in one hand, looking toward who knows what, the window, the hardwood floor, a teacup, a pressing task I'd already forgotten, and felt the warmth of my hand. My eyelids drooped with the weight of exhaustion, and my body fell into its rhythmic inhale and exhale. If it had been intentional, I might have called it meditation, but it wasn't. It was the lungs and heart doing what they do. And while I did not possess the awareness to be in awe of my body's simplicity and power, still each breath pulled me through to the next moment. Does that accurately describe your memory?
Yeah.
Looking back
Mm,
of grief brain.
of grief brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because it is real. Like it's like pregnant brain. You know, when you put the milk in the pantry, there's no recollection of having done it, but the milk's there,
And when
souring.
when someone's having those moments in grief brain, what advice do you have for people who want to help? Is it yeah.
I have advice. I was so afraid that I would be ostracized because of how Sam had died.
Yeah.
But what I found was actually the opposite. What I found was incredible connection. People wanted to share, people wanted to hear. And what I learned was that everybody has a gift. And some people, their gift is cooking, and we need to eat, and that's all good. And some people, their gift is making a playlist. Like they love music, and so they're really good at making a playlist.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people who want to help, what I would say is you have a gift and we need it. Whatever your gift is, just bring it. It is so helpful when somebody shows up with their gift and all you have to say is yes. Like I had so many people, something I do in the book, I had so many people who wanted to help me that I couldn't develop all of these people as full-fledged characters in the book because it would be too confusing and too long. But so I started calling them the Janes. There was Jane MD who brought me Xanax so I could sleep. And so that's a gift if you happen to be a doctor and can help somebody who is your patient get some of the pharmaceutical help that might be very helpful for them in that moment. That's a gift. Everybody's favorite Jane in the book is who I call Engineer Jane.
I wrote that down. No, I have this because I was going to go there. Engineer Jane. And
Engineer Jane is everyone's favorite Jane because she comes up to me one day at school and she says, Charlotte, I have no social skills and I can't cook, but I have noticed that you and the kids are late to school every day. And so what Engineer Jane does is she walks us to school every day for months. So for months, she arrived on my doorstep at 7:45 every morning with her two kids in tow, by the way. And so she'd walk in the door and we'd be like, socks, shoes, lunches, homework, here we go, up the hill to school. I don't know anyone who can be on my doorstep every morning for months on end at 7:45 to walk me and my kids to school, but I only needed one. I didn't need 12 engineers on my doorstep every morning. I just needed one. And she was there. And so I think there's so many ways that we can help, so many ways to just show up and pay attention. Show up and pay attention. Does somebody need help with the laundry? This was back, Sam died in 2007, but I had a friend who would come and she would collect my bills and she would write the checks. She would write the checks, everything except my signature. She would put stamps on the envelopes, and she would put a Post-it note with the due date on the bill. And so all I had to do was sign it, put it into the envelope, and put it in the mail. And that was something that was so helpful because with grief brain,
there was a lot of a uphill battle or barriers just to getting access to financial accounts because it was just in Sam's name, or trying to just manage utilities because you had a proof death certificate, or you had or the account was going to be shut down. And so to have a Jane help you navigate that or take care of some of those afterthought utility bills for you, that speaks volumes.
Yeah. Whatever your gift is, bring it.
Yeah.
Just bring it. You want to drive carpool, make lasagna, whatever. Bring it. We need it.
And so you had a very special Christmas in a time where I'm sure you were wondering, how are we even going to get through this? And tell us about the 12 days of Christmas.
So Sam died in October. And so Thanksgiving sucked. And can I say that?
You can cuss all you want. This is a full adult show. That isn't even a cuss word. We can. Oh, and you got to talk about your URL with Sushi too. We're going to go there too.
And I was dreading Christmas.
Yeah,
I was absolutely dreading Christmas. And sometime mid-December, and it's so dark in December. Sometime mid-December, there's a knock on the door, or the doorbell rings, and the kids run to the front door because it's always fun if somebody's coming to the front door, because people had been coming to the front door with dinners, and so who was bringing dinner tonight. And so, but they open the door and there's nobody there, and there is one of those triangular shaped Trader Joe's boxes with a gingerbread house kit in it, and it has this silver ribbon on it and a little square note that says, "On the first day of Christmas, ... And so we collected inside, and I think my parents did the gingerbread house with the kids. And the next night, the same thing happens. The doorbell rings, and when we get to the door, there's nobody there, but there were 2 snowman mugs with packets of hot chocolate mix tucked inside, and it says, "On the second day of Christmas, ... And at first, we kind of wanted to know who had done it, but we were out at, therapy or something, because we went to a lot of therapy. Big fan. His, yes. Hers, ours, all the therapies. So at first we tried to catch them, but we couldn't. They were too clever. But every single gift, the third night, the fourth night, had this same silver ribbon and the same note on the fourth night of Christmas. And it was always simple things like 6 oranges or 7 apples or 8 candy canes. I can't remember now exactly what the things were. But at some point, I started kind of liking the not knowing of it. There was something very magical almost about not knowing who it was. I had even asked my friend Karen, I was like, did you do this? Because it kind of seemed like the thing she would do. And she's like, no, I wish I was doing it. And I was like, who could it be? But then I kind of, like I said, I kind of started warming up to the idea of not knowing. And so then I would kind of make a point of corralling the kids in the back and reading a book. And then, oh, there goes the doorbell. And by the time they got there, our little elf had disappeared. But I didn't kind of know what to expect on the 12th night, which was the 24th of Christmas Eve. And we were expecting something, but I really didn't want the kids to be disappointed because I was, life had already dealt them the biggest disappointment I could imagine. And so I was very protective of them and their little big feelings. And we got home from a friend's house because I couldn't stomach the idea of doing the same thing we always did for Christmas Eve, but without Sam. So we went to a friend's house. And when I came home, Krista, it looked like Santa himself had delivered the contents of an entire sleigh. There were 12 gifts, 4 for me, 4 for Danny, 4 for Jason, all different colors of paper, all different ribbons. And it was amazing to feel so cared for and seen and so, just so loved. And I still don't know who did it. And now I don't want to know. So listeners, if you know, don't tell me. Because part of what's so beautiful about it is not knowing, just that place for love to enter. Like, you don't have to know, but there she is.
It's like the most selfless thing. You don't need the acknowledgement as the giver to be like, oh, can you please say thank you?
I do hope that if you do know who it is, please tell them thank you. And
yeah. But at the end of the day, it was just the most selfless thing. And it's not just a one-time thing. It is you created magic in such a dark place.
Yeah.
In someone's life.
Yes, they did. They created something. Well, and they created hope. Because for the first time, we were looking forward to something. Like, we wondered, what are they going to bring tomorrow? Yeah. What are they going to bring the next night? And so at a time when everything is so dark and heavy, and it is very hard to imagine what tomorrow will bring, and a little scary, they created this sense of hope in a place where we weren't experiencing a lot of hope. It was, truly one of the most stunning gifts I have ever received in my life.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, I had to bring that up. That part in your book was, oh, my goodness. So I don't even know where to go from here because I am like really emotional just thinking about someone being able to offer you guys those 12 days. I mean, I guess, obviously life moved on. You guys continued. I do want to, what were your daily practices, and talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, Sushi Tuesdays and what does Sushi Tuesdays mean for you?
Okay. I guess part of what I want to say is that the healing is ongoing. As you know, Krista, Sam's birthday was last week, and so there's not a date certain on which healing ends. There's no time that life just moves forward without him, but you're not supposed to get over it. You carry it with you, and I often think, love remembers. That's the thing. Love remembers. And that's okay. It's not so heavy. And I don't feel like time heals all wounds. I feel like time plus work is what time gives you space to do the healing work, is how I think of it. Time by itself doesn't do the healing, but time gives you the space to do the healing. And so one of the things for me that is healing for me is writing. And so because, as I said, I was very sort of transparent about how Sam died, and I was surprised at how much people, wanted to hear and connect. And sadly, suicide is one of the leading causes of death in this country. I'm not sure whether it's 10th or 11th. It's something like that. It's the second leading cause of death for 2 age demographics, 25 to 35 and 10 to 14, which is horrifying. Yeah. And so I found that speaking about my grief and my process and speaking about suicide was something that people cared about. And so I started a blog And when I was going through my healing process, Tuesdays became a sacred day for me. I had my therapist had a recurring slot open up for her on Tuesdays, and I had a yoga class that I really liked on Tuesdays. And so Tuesdays became my day just for me. I called it my Charlotte Shabbat. This was my day just to focus on my own well-being and healing. And as a single parent, I knew I had to preserve that time for myself. So as a practical matter, it was just from the time I dropped the kids off at school and until I picked them up. But I really guarded that time as a sacred time for my own healing. And sometimes I would take myself out for sushi party of one. The kids were 6 and 8, so they didn't really care about sushi back then, which is good because now they do care and it's very expensive. So Tuesdays were my day just for me. And about a year after Sam's death, the chaplain from one of our local suicide advocacy groups asked me to speak. The chaplain and my therapist asked me to speak at a children's grief conference. I was basically Exhibit A. And so when I shared my story, the chaplain afterwards said, when you write your book, Charlotte, you should call it Sushi Tuesdays. And so I thought, okay, that sounds like a good catchy title for a book. But a book was too big. And so I started by writing a blog. And I had always imagined Sushi Tuesdays as it shows actually on the book, sushi, and then underneath Tuesdays. But in URL form, there's one of what we call Uncle Jose's colorful words right in the middle of Sushi Tuesdays. And once you see the shit in the middle, you kind of can't unsee it.
It's shit. It is just shit.
So I hadn't planned it. I kind of wished I had, but but once it was there, I think it's kind of poetic because it really deals with grief is messy and it stinks. And so, Sushi Tuesdays, that's where the title comes from, is my self-care day. But I do love that it has the shit right in the middle of it because that I think is sort of poetic, and it is how we have to heal, is dealing with all the crap.
Did you let the chaplain know later on about his recommendation for
hers? But yes,
her recommendation.
And she loved it too, which I think speaks to a really good chaplain.
Yes.
If they are willing to get in the mess with you, and good friends, if they're willing to just sit with you in the shit, those are keepers.
I love that. Oh, it's so great. It is so great. Just sit in the shit.
Sometimes that's what it is. It's like this.
Oh my goodness. Well, what are you doing today? So you have your blog and your website. You have the book. What does advocacy look like for you? And if anyone who is listening would like to do more, what do you recommend that they do?
This is a great question. Well, first of all, talk about it. Don't be afraid to say the S word. You are not going to create more suicides. You're going to create more awareness, and you're going to create more connection. I think, reading about it, understanding what the signs are, learning how to speak about suicide. One of the things that we avoid the term commit suicide because the word commit has connotations of criminality, and suicide is not a crime. Suicide's a disease. It's an illness. And so the way we speak about suicide makes a difference. That having been said, I would rather have glitchy conversations about suicide than no conversations about suicide, because silence is definitely not the answer. And just being a safe space for people to talk to, and just paying attention to your people.
Absolutely. One thing in your book, I had the same reaction when I heard the phrase suicide survivor, because when you hear suicide survivor from an outside perspective, and before I got into crime and trauma scene cleaning, I'm like, wait, so they didn't complete suicide? They survived. And the term is actually for those who were close around them who lost a loved one to suicide. And I think
I find it a very confusing term.
And I've been using suicide loss survivor. And for some reason that makes sense to me. And how do you feel when you hear that? Like, you're a survivor of suicide loss is how I'm.
Yeah,
Suicide.
That term is fine with me. I learned a term recently that I actually really love, suicide postvention, because I look forward to the world when there are no suicides, but we don't live in that world yet.
Yeah.
And just we don't live in a world where cancer doesn't steal some of our loved ones from us entirely too soon. And so I work in suicide prevention, but also suicide postvention. That is more of where my expertise is, because it is so important that healing from suicide is a very complicated death to come to terms with. And, you know, it was complicated for me to understand. I was 39 when Sam died, and it was very hard to understand. And when children have experienced the suicide of someone they love, whether it's a parent or sibling or a grandparent or an aunt or uncle or a friend, it is a very complicated death to come to terms with. And they revisit it at each developmental stage. And so it's important to kind of understand that this healing work really isn't done after the Legos break. Yeah. That it continues. And yes, it is a great metaphor, and it continues to be a great metaphor. I wish I could tell you that the kids don't still suffer from their father's suicide, but they do. And it's not the same as it was, and they understand it, but they're never not going to think about it. Sam was 41 when he died. Yeah. When these kids are 41 themselves, they're going to think about this again in a whole new way. When their children are 6 or 8, I think they are going to understand in a whole new way that their father would have left them. Yeah. So I think that it's important to talk about it and to keep talking about it.
I agree. And if anyone needs help out there, you know, there's the 988 hotline. I loved your message in the book saying every cell phone should already have the National Suicide Hotline phone number already pre-etched into it. I highlighted, circled that, starred it a million times. I thought that was just so, yeah. Some of these national numbers to get help, because Sam only had, 10 contacts in his phone. And if he had that one, maybe. Who knows? I think just the fact of having the 988 lifeline out there, just the fact that we have it. Yes. And so listeners, if you don't know 988, you can call or text any time of the day or night. And it doesn't even have to be your own mental health emergency. If you are worried about somebody else, you can call or text 988. I think just the fact that it's there is a great reminder that everybody needs help sometimes. Yeah. I think that alone helps to take the stigma and shame out of asking for help. Yeah. If you feel like you have no one to call, there's always someone to call. There's always someone to call. There's someone that's willing to listen. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you would like to share on the podcast today that maybe we haven't covered, or a parting thank you or message to anybody? I'll leave it in your hands. Sorry, Krista, I think you've done such a beautiful job with this work. I'm so grateful to you for highlighting this very important, like you say, hidden story. And just, there's always hope. I think that's the only thing I would just make sure people know. There is hope. Yes. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you for doing this with me. There's so much more to do, and this is just the beginning for Bright Sky House and She Diaries, and I'm so grateful for you to trust us with your story. Thank you, Krista. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us for this episode of She Diaries. We know these conversations can be incredibly heavy. If you're feeling overwhelmed or need support, please take a moment to care for yourself. In the show notes, you'll find links to mental health resources, crisis lines, and support groups. If you're in crisis or need immediate help, call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You are not alone. If today's story moved you, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode with someone who might need it. To stay connected, follow us on social media at Bright Sky House and subscribe to our e-newsletter at brightskyhouse.com. If you'd like to connect with a guest or share your own story for a future episode, send us a note at hello@brightskyhouse.com. Every story deserves to be heard. Thank you for helping bring this one to light. Until next time, I'm Krista Gregg, and this is She Diaries.
These are